This PSA was brought to you by the Peter G Show.
You may have second thoughts after the show.
Don't drink the Foster. We're really talented. We should get Oscars.
Just pick out a car, for Christ's sake.
No, hi, my name is Peter.
Yeah, I want.
Here's good.
Yeah.
Madam Perry.
I need to get back in the genie bottle.
Louis from Pennsylvania, you're on.
He likes it.
It's showtime.
Peter G Show, divorce dad, single dad, divorce dad, single dad, Peter G Show.
That's right, it's showtime. Wednesday, December 14th. 11 days till Christmas, folks. My, how time has flown. There's a part of me that's so glad this year is over, but there's a part of me that doesn't like pushing things, if you know what I mean. Hope everybody's doing well. It's kind of chilly here in sunny Southern California. We've a nicer chilly. Today was kind of nice for a few hours. The sun, when the sun was shining down. I know that there's probably some of you that are already shoveling snow, and I am sorry, but it is what it is. But we're all here, and that's the good thing. Amazing show tonight. And when I say amazing, with a capital A, the story of all stories. Tonight, I'm going to have narcissistic child abuse survivor, Miss Marnie Grundman. She's going to be on this show. Her story. It's a hell of a story. Part of our Getting Through the Holidays series. Remember, you're not alone. This is why we're doing what we're doing. Sharing stories. Speaking of sharing stories, she's coming up in a couple of minutes. Speaking of sharing stories, next week, right before Christmas, Wednesday, December 21st, I'm going to have family law attorney from New York, Miss Deborah Whitson from Whitson Law. She's going to be on this show. And we're going to talk about all kinds of things. She talks about dealing with divorce. She talks about how dealing with your children, co-parenting. I mean, all the above, all the things that affect. And again, I'm all about the kids because you brought them into this world and don't screw them up. And that's what we talk about. Plus, you need your own sanity too. And divorce and all these kind of things can, a lot of people, it can drive you to drink under the table. And I don't want that. And I hope even if it doesn't affect you, that you will share in hopes that you share it with people who you know need this kind of help, need to see these kind of stories to realize that it's not just their problem. Back to the, you're not alone. There's a lot of that going around. You just need to know it exists. And here we are, Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show, right here every Wednesday, like clockwork, God willing, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, and 9 p.m. on the East Coast, right here. And again, for those of you who can't get the show, you're busy at that time of day, don't worry, it's on demand. You can pick it up on all the various platforms. And please, please, please go to my YouTube channel, Peter G Show, and just hit the subscribe button, please. It's free. I'm trying to make a difference over there. I was using that thing for storage for a long time, and then we went live on YouTube and did a few shows that YouTube wanted to censor us for telling the truth, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. You decide. But then they started throttling me down. So we just got to keep bringing people in there to let them know that, you know what? It counts. People want to see. So do me that favor. And again, if you're on the go, you know, not everybody. I love the people that can take the time to watch the show. But for those of you that can't, take me on the road with you. Put an earbud in your ear. We have podcasts. It goes to audio. It's on 21 different platforms. Go to Google, Peter G Show Podcast. It's everywhere from Amazon Music to Spotify to Apple Podcasts, all the above and some. And you can listen to it while you're driving in the car. You can listen to it while you're at work. Everybody knows work is boring. Put an earbud in your ear and just check it out. It's worth it. It's worth it. And like I said, coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to have Miss Marnie Grundman on the show with her story, live from Canada. I don't know if she's shoveling snow over there yet, but we're going to find out. But as always, before we get to her, We're going to get a quick word from our sponsor, and we'll be back in a minute.
Let us help you with the high price of fuel. Hello, I'm Ty Thompson at CleanStarProducts.com. We can optimize your engine, saving you money and gas. Here's how. Our program works the same with gasoline and diesel engines. Whether you're using a car pack or SUV pack, the instructions are the same. Add 1 bottle to your engine oil, and each time you change your oil, add 1 bottle to the fuel tank each and every fuel fill-up. It's that easy. You get 10% fuel economy on average, lower emissions, and increased horsepower. DX1 sells for $2 an ounce, so for just a few dollars a fuel tank, you can optimize your engine, saving you money and gas. Come on, give it a try. It's the finest green grade oil in the world from a California environmental company. You're gonna feel it when you drive. Order online today, we'll get it out right away. CleanStarProducts.com/shop.
That's right, people. CleanStarProducts.com with their DX1 driver. Hey, let's face it. Gas is expensive. Cars are expensive. It's ridiculous, actually. Take care of your cars just like you take care of yourself. For just a few dollars, you can invest in your car and keep it. I'm a car keeper. I do not need the fanciest, latest, flashiest. And those who know me know me. But the thing is, I take care of cars. I love to see, my father was like that, to see how long they would go and the bodies would be rotting off. But the thing is, again, it's not an investment. They're tools. Take care of your cars. Look at this little bottle. Look at the size of this little thing. You put this in your crankcase. When you get a clean oil change. This bottle is smaller than the size of my hand. And again, you know what they say about big hands, right? So put this in your oil, helps the lubricity of the engine, helps it run smoother, less friction, better gas economy, mileage. And let me tell you, it's also scientifically certified. It passes the California Emissions Board. And if anything can pass California, you know what a pain in the ass they are. So it's got to be, decent stuff. Right here. If you want more information on Clean Star Products, just go to their website, CleanStarProducts.com. Talk to them. They'll talk to you, and find out if you have any more questions. But tell them the Peter G Show sent you, and get you, again, a small price to pay to save money in the long run. And I'll guarantee that. So just, again, go there and tell them Peter G sent you. Next, as promised, coming up, telling her story, Ms. Marnie Grundman is coming right up in just a minute. Now we're going to get acquainted with her. I want you to check out this video.
I was 5 years old when my mother dropped me out of a 2-story window. It was 1971. Her and my brother were having an argument over a package of cigarettes. She wanted him to go to the store. And back then, kids could go buy cigarettes for their parents. Their parents would just give them a note. As they were arguing, my mother told me to go up the stairs and put my hand out the window to see if it was raining, which I did. I yelled down that it was drizzling, and she didn't like my answer. She came up the stairs and she said, "Put your arm out, check properly," which I did. And I responded again that it was raining. She told me to lean out further, to put both my hands out the window, which again I did. The next thing I knew, my mother had picked me up and was holding me by my legs. I felt her let go. To this day, I can remember the sensation of the fall, the smell of the rain in the air. I have zero memory, thankfully, of impact, which was on the grass, which had been softened by the rain. My next memory is of my mother putting me in my blankie and into a taxi, and I passed out again. She never called an ambulance. Authorities were never made aware that this accident had occurred. In the hospital, I woke up with casts on both of my arms, holding my arms in a straight position. Only my thumb and my fingers were free, and the cast went right underneath my armpits. This marks the beginning of my living with my grandparents, who created my mother. I ended up with them for 4 years. It also marks the beginning in my conscious memory of me becoming the scapegoat in the family joke. Oh, she was trying to fly like Supergirl. The story that my mother spun was that I was playing on a toy box that I was not allowed to be playing on, that I knew better, and I fell out the window. There was no toy box and nobody questioned her. One of my aunts, somewhere around this time, also began calling me the liar. I don't know if I tried to tell the truth about the story or if I divulged anything. I don't feel like I did. I just know that this is the time period that marks who I became within my narcissistic family system. I have been no contact with my family, with those relatives, for over 30 years. I'm really lucky to be here. I'm lucky to be alive. I share my story because I was alone for so long. And I grew up feeling like nobody else knew what I was going through. And as an adult, and because of the blessings of the internet, I've come to know that I was never alone. That was the gaslighting. So please join me on my journey and let's all continue to heal together.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Marnie Grundman. Marnie, how are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me on, Peter.
No, it's my pleasure. You're in Canada?
I am in Montreal, yes.
Is it cold over there?
It is freezing.
Wow, sorry.
Thanks for asking.
That's okay. All I can say is, after doing the homework that I did when I first discovered you, is wow. And that doesn't even express that. I mean, all I can do is imagine, but I've learned that there's some things, no matter how hard you imagine, there's no imagining, if that makes any sense.
I can't imagine it, and I went through it, so it makes perfect sense to me.
Okay, so I played a short synopsis of the story that you gave, but there's a lot more that went on behind just that incident. I mean, why don't we do this? Why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself and tell everybody, who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing what you did, or what you're doing. How's that?
Okay, well, my name is Marnie Grundman, and about a little over a decade ago, 12 years ago, I started to share my story. I wrote my first book. And the reason I wrote that book was because of the fact that at 13 years old, due to all the abuse that I was experiencing in my household, I ran away from home. And I ran away from home and ended up being a homeless youth. I actually began running away shortly after the time when my mother dropped me out of the two-story window. So by the time I was 13, I made it stick. And I ended up living homeless on the streets for about a year and a half before I lucked into a job as a cocktail waitress at 14 and a half, and got myself off of the streets and raised myself from that point on, at least where I was housed most of the time. I wrote the book because there was nothing out there that spoke to me. Like, there was nothing that was sharing a story about how a kid ends up on the streets like that and what we go through to survive, and that we're not the bad ones. And I was always looking for something that would help me on that part of my journey. And that became expanded into people wanting to know more detail about how it is I ended up on the streets. So that's how the story the background that I share now became to be. As a part of what I've been doing for the last decade, I work in the prevention of youth homelessness. I'm a spokesperson for a couple of different organizations. I go into schools and I speak to kids, and I also do workshops for people who would be connecting to children who are in need, like social workers, for example, hospital, medical staff, police officers, and the like. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, so now let's back it up, because you were how old when you got dropped out the window?
I was around 5 years old.
Okay. Why do you think that happened? I mean, was she trying to off you, and make an accident? Because let's start from there. I mean, even though there's so many more aspects of the whole thing.
Well, I mean, first of all, she had no way of knowing that I would survive that fall. And
Exactly.
that's the realization that I only came, trauma is a funny thing. We heal in little bits and pieces and things come into focus. And when one thing comes into focus and you've kind of addressed that in a more full way, then something else happens that you go, oh, it's like the bad gift that keeps on giving. So I realize now that she had no way of knowing that I was going to survive. So I have to go with the assumption that she was trying to unalive me, as we say now. I came to find out a few years back by connecting to someone who knew me back then, that she allegedly, I don't know for sure, sued the landlord afterwards because there were no screens on the window. So it would appear that she was doing it for monetary gain. That wasn't the only time she abused me, but that was the worst physical abuse that she ever perpetrated against me. Most of it was emotional.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I obviously there's way more that went on, but that could have been life or death at that point, and you survived it. And I'm just wondering, like, were you, in her eyes, a problem child, or she's just out of her mind?
So, well, let's talk about why abusers abuse. Abusers abuse because they can, and because of who they are, and because of their need to be in control. So it really had nothing to do with whether or not she liked or loved or hated me personally. It had everything to do with the fact that she had a plaything that she could hurt at will, who could do nothing about it. She abused the men in her life in much the same way psychologically. She abused anyone that she felt she had hold over. My mother is a sociopath and a narcissist, and I'm not a diagnostician. I say this from a place of having not just gone to therapy, but I speak to hospitals. I speak at psych wards, and I've never had a psychiatrist or a psychologist come to me and say anything different than that. Antisocial personality disorder and a narcissist. So they take pleasure in causing pain, and they always abuse their children. It's not a maybe, it is an always.
Okay. But abuse is one thing. That was just about almost murder.
Yeah.
That's to me, there's a, like, burning you, hitting you, spanking you, punishing you, but murdering you is deeper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we think about, though, how somebody abuses a child, there's a lot of times where they take the risk of that child dying, right? They're not thinking about those consequences. But in the case of my mother, because of the part of her that's a sociopath, she will do anything for financial gain. I had three stepfathers. I had to do the counts. Sorry. I had three stepfathers. My brother had four. The last one I didn't really know because he was in my adult life. But 3 out of her 5 husbands died. The first stepfather, I know for a fact, and I know I probably have to say alleged, so I will, but I was there. I know she had something to do with that, and I know there was financial gain from that. 4 months later, she was married to somebody else. And that man died of cancer, so I'm going to give her a pass on that one. But the last one who died, according to some conversation that I had with one of my daughters, where I have in black and white things that were in dialogue between her and my mother, they were speaking at that time. I think she likely had something to do with his death too. It's not unusual for someone who is a sociopath and a narcissist to off people for financial gain. They don't have a conscience. They just want to meet their needs, and they don't care how they do it.
That is beyond crazy. I mean, I know it happens. We see movies about things like that, but it's just to think that you're with somebody and that one person truly like loves that person or whatever, and they're okay with just getting rid of them and killing them, and moving on like that. I mean, I know a lot of people that jump from one relationship into another, which is stupid.
Yeah, but not.
But not necessarily killing them, just getting rid of them, just breaking up or whatever, and they just can't be alone, and they already have something lined up in the way. But this is beyond. Let's talk about a little bit more about other things while you were a child. I mean, you know, just give me a few more. Okay, you got dropped out of the window, but I mean, other types of abuse, mental, physical, sexual, all of that stuff. A few more examples, because it's endless, I think.
Well, for me and for survivors that I talk to, so for those of you out there, I work as a therapist that deals specifically with adult survivors of child abuse from people who were narcissists or on that scale of narcissism. Not everybody has actual NPD, but the patterns of behavior of abuse are very much the same. And it's pretty easy to tell that that is who was raising and abusing that child. The emotional abuse that my mother put me through far outweighed even the breaking of my arms from dropping me out of that window. My mother was telling me that I was a tramp when I was 9 years old, that I was damaged goods, that boys only want me for one thing. And she knew that I was being molested and was allowing me to be molested. These are the kinds of things that I grew up with. So at every turn, there was something coming from my mother that was going to result in my pain. Her favorite activity, though, like her number one thing, was to play, if anyone's seen Mommy Dearest, with my closet. So she would go into my room, and this began at all ages. There was a 4-year period there. I didn't live with her after the window. And she would wrinkle over a shirt, and the closet had to be kept very specifically. Color organized. The shirts had to be folded a very specific way. And I'm talking from the time I'm like 8 years old. And I had to maintain that to her standard. So she'd go in, wrinkle a shirt over, and then lose her mind, rip the whole closet apart, throw it on the floor, all while screaming at me like a rabid dog, terrifying me, calling me names, and then leaving me to have to pick up the mess. I didn't know from one day to the next what day that was going to be or how I was going to be violated. So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about emotional abuse. She wasn't punching me physically, but what she was doing to me emotionally was actually worse because nobody could see what she was doing. I had no proof.
I don't even know where to begin with this. I really don't. I mean, but I'm going to start. You said you were being molested.
Yes.
How and when and by who?
So my first victimizer to my memory, my first perpetrator to my memory was my grandfather. Whether or not my mother knew about that, I don't know. But my grandmother definitely did because she was present, which was another memory that I processed. I remembered he molested me, but I didn't remember my grandmother's part in it. And my grandmother was a functional alcoholic. In other words, she could throw great parties and be the hostess with the mostest, but she also had drinks hiding behind every corner of the house, like in a bookcase behind like a picture or, under the bathroom sink kind of thing. After that, when I ended up living with my mother again, my mother would send me down to the pool by myself. And I would have been 8, 9, 10 years old. And there was an elderly, oh my God, I just said that. He was probably in his 50s, but to a little child, he looked elderly. Oh my goodness. Anyway, there was a lifeguard there who was also a caretaker of the property. He had a cabana that he lived in. He had a little store with little trinkets and things like that, things that were shiny and attractive to little kids. I was pretty much the only kid living in that building. He was molesting me. And my mother knew, and the reason I know she knew was because he was giving me gifts, which I would promptly hide in the drawer in my bedroom in the back. And I never played with them. I never brought them out. I didn't want them. And I stopped going down to the pool and started like playing in the parking garage to avoid him. My mother found the gifts and she basically said to me, I know what you're doing for these, and still kept sending me down to the pool. And when she figured out that I wasn't at the pool, I got in all sorts of trouble. So then what I would do is I would go down and she would force me out of the house, that I had to go to the pool by myself and be molested by this man. I would hide or sit like in the hallway where he couldn't see me, that was leading out to the pool, but where I could see her coming should she come down to get me. And that's where I would stay all day.
Wow. All right. I don't want to get how do I do this? I don't want to get graphic, but when
Yeah,
you
it's
said,
not.
what at what age did you actually have I mean, if there, it's hard to say. Molesting is like there's so many different
I see
variables.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, um, first of all, children don't start having sex, right? Because anything related to sex for a child, for a person under the age of 18, is rape. It is sexual assault, and there's nothing about it that's sex. But to answer your question, I ran away from home when I was 12 years old, and I ended up in a car with somebody who offered to feed me and take care of me, and he sexually assaulted me throughout the night. He could have killed me. He could have done any number of things. And people thought, oh, she's just a runaway. She'll come back home. In the meantime, I was being held captive all night. And that was my first entree into losing my virginity, which I didn't even know I had lost because I didn't even know what that word meant.
Right. Look, I don't think there's any good when you say molesting. There's nothing good at whatever level.
Yeah.
But it fascinates me about what turns these people on to do to someone like you. You know what I mean?
Control. It's just about power and control. It's not actually about sex. I think it's so important for people to understand that somebody who sexually violates another human being, no matter the age, it's never about the sex. It's always about the dominance.
Huh. Again, you don't know until you know, unfortunately, which is something I'm sure you wish you never had to know. But in the course of all this, running away, being, having all these issues, your grandfather, all this stuff, it's amazing. You have children, correct?
I have 3 children, and they're awesome.
I get that, and we're going to get to all that too, because to me, everything is a miracle. But it's a miracle that nothing bad like you didn't have children at 12 years old or 13 years old.
I was 17.
Okay, 17. But by somebody you wanted to have children with, or somebody that just...
Well, it wasn't that it was somebody that I wanted to have children with necessarily. And of course, being that I was still in the middle of trauma, that wouldn't have been a decision I could make. But when I was a runaway at 16, I met somebody that I ended up living with and ended up pregnant. He was 10 years older than I was at the time. He didn't know my real name. He didn't know I was a runaway, but he knew that I was young. I'm not going to give him a complete free pass on that. He didn't want me to have the baby, so I left him because I knew that I wanted to have the baby, who ended up being my daughter, but obviously I didn't know that at the time. So that wasn't something that I planned, but as it turned out, I credit my little daughter with saving my life, because I rose to the occasion to do things better for her that I would not have done for myself.
I get that. And that's what, but I mean, I guess the question I wanted to ask you is that, okay, you got pregnant, but it wasn't forced upon you. I mean, you kind of just took to this person. It was 2 ships passing in the night. You're young. I mean, and there's plenty of that. I mean, that goes on.
Yeah, we lived together for a long time, but the thing is that I was a minor and he was a fully formed adult. So we can't really say that, that relationship was fully consensual, because I was a child. The only sticky point in that is he didn't know that. But in an ordinary situation, you have a 26, 27, 28-year-old man with a 16-year-old. That is not consensual sex. I want to be very clear here. No gray area on that.
Okay, true, but you misled him, and and a lot of kids look older than what they look like, but you were willing. Yes. But you were willingly there, and you actually did kind of like him. It wasn't, again, like
him. Yeah, absolutely. There was nothing traumatic about the relationship. Okay. I just want to be careful how we address this, because people go, babies shouldn't happen with people who are 16. Well, no, they shouldn't. But typically when you have somebody who is a trauma survivor, their ability to think critically to consent is not the same as somebody else's, right? And thinking about the fact in that situation, fortunately for me, was not one where I was being sexually assaulted, although certainly on the streets that happened frequently, it's important to understand that for somebody who has survived sexual abuse in childhood, our body does not belong to us. So we will look like possibly we are consenting to have sex with someone when really we're freezing and fawning from the coping mechanisms that are left behind. And so that's yet another reason why somebody should not be having sex with someone, or it's not sex, as I said earlier, but we should be aware that consent isn't just being a willing participant. Consent is making sure that that person is a person who can be a willing participant. And in terms of age, I mean, do I look 17 there? I'm just saying. And I was 16 when I met him, 15 and a half.
I get it, but a lot goes on. I mean, me growing up in the South, I kind of knew a lot of kids that were at 15. They were at, having but I don't. How does anybody know what's going on in your head? And to know right from wrong. I mean, at that point, I'm usually not at a loss for words.
Let's just take it from this perspective. Yes, I misled him. He didn't know my age. And I'm just saying that, I was a runaway, and I was not in a place with him where I was being violated in any way. And I don't want to paint that as he was violating me. Yeah, 100,000%. I was willing to be with him, and I wanted to be with him, and I loved him, in my little 16-year-old way. But I want us to be careful in how we communicate these things, because children cannot consent, right? And it's important for people to be aware that if they're connecting to somebody who is in a place in their life where they're unhealed from sexual trauma, their ability to say no doesn't always come through verbally. And there are a lot of times where the other individual will push their agenda for what they want, even though they feel that person pulling back, and they'll move forward anyway. So we have to be more aware of how we gain consent in this world now, because we have more knowledge and understanding of what that looks like. And when we do that, then everybody is getting a little healthier and supporting one another, instead of having situations in a gray area where you run the risk of re-traumatizing someone, which may not be your intention, right? And with regard to 15-year-olds having sex, again, they're not. What is happening is when you have a 15-year-old that is engaging in the act of sex, even if it's with another 15-year-old, what that tells me as a mom is that there's something in the household where these children aren't being given the tools that they need to feel good enough about themselves to know that that's something that they can wait for. My kids, and I know when they started having sex, didn't start having sex at 15 years old.
Right. I guess now, listening, I get at 15, 14, 13, 17, the brain isn't really developed. I mean, the body grows, but as an adult now, and unfortunately you can't figure that out until you get to that point to where you figure it out. People can tell you things till you're blue in the face, but my father used to constantly tell me, he says, the brain hasn't fully developed yet. I mean, whether he was,
well, my kids that, of course.
Okay, but that's the thing. So when you're at 17, you're doing what you're doing based on whether you want to do it need or necessity or against your will. But the against your will part is I'm talking about when you're, free will, when you're making these choices. You grew up really hard and fast because you were forced to grow up hard and fast.
Yeah, but I wasn't mature.
I'm sorry?
But I wasn't matured, and I wasn't in a position where I was making decisions from a place of critical thinking. I was making decisions out of survival. Let's remember that, right?
Well, but I mean, cocktail waitress at 14 years old. Yeah. Most kids would not be able to put that together to figure out.
Yeah, if you end up on the streets, most kids would, because I had other kids that I was working in bars with. Most kids who live at home, who have the structure that they need, wouldn't have the necessity to do that. So of course they wouldn't be able to do that. But when you live on the streets on park benches and you're starving, you figure it out real fast.
Okay, because I would think that you could end up being susceptible to pimps and people that will, I mean, that happens here, and I used to see it back in my Hollywood days. I mean, all these young girls coming here following their dreams, and the big reality was their dreams were a myth, and before you know it, there's predators waiting on taking them under their wing, and that's that.
Well, within 2 to 48 hours, a child who is on the streets will be approached by somebody who wants to exploit them. How's that for a number? And 1 in 5 kids who end up on the streets will end up being trafficked, either for sex or for labor. I was trafficked for labor, and I had a bartender who tried to sell me for sex. So yeah, it happens. It happened to me.
How did you get out of that?
So the bartender that was trying to sell me for $5,000, I told my boss, and my boss fired him. I was really lucky that I had been working at that bar for some period of time. It was owned by a family. Actually, they're the Flynn family, who were a really big family in Miami back then. I didn't realize it, but they owned a bunch of bars. And they kind of took me under their wing in terms of me being their employee. And when I went to them and I told them what happened, they fired him. And that was the end of that. So that's how I got out of that one. For the labor trafficking, I escaped when I was in Louisiana. They, at that point, trusted me to go out alone and work. And as soon as I had that opportunity, I dumped the chemicals that I was selling for them. It was like a cleaning chemical company, and I ran.
How do they force you to work? Explain.
That's a great question, actually. So let's start at the beginning. I answer an ad for a job that says, oh, travel, paid training, see the world, that kind of thing. So I pick up the phone and I call him. Back then we didn't have cell phones. And this man interviews me for like a couple of minutes and paints this big dream and this huge adventure. The next thing I know, he pulls up to where I was staying at the time. I had a little backpack. I get in a van with 2 guys. Yep. And there were like 4 or 5 kids in the back, right around the same ages as I was. And they take us on the road. Now, none of us have any money. All of us are underage. It's pretty clear that either we're runaways or kids who were thrown out of our homes. And they take us from place to place, and they don't feed us. They don't give us anything unless we sell. They don't pay us. And we're basically at their mercy because we have nowhere to go.
The police?
As a child who's a runaway trying not to end up back in their abusive home.
Fair enough. I used to see these ads. Those ads also travel, model, but models see the world, and it'd be these good-looking women. They take them to the Middle East or Dubai or something like that, and then they're stuck over there, pimping them out to all these rich people.
It's happening more now than it ever did before because of the internet. Human trafficking is the second fastest growing industry in the world, because it's an industry where you don't have to keep reinvesting in your product. Your product continues to perform. And for a person who is being trafficked for sex, their average lifespan is 7 years as a victim of human trafficking.
And then death, or they finally get
They die either through things that were caused to their body through the abuses, suicide, drug overdose, other health issues. 7 years. And, they're trafficking on average kids between, like in Canada, 11 to 17, 16 being the more hard number. And it's not just kids who end up out on the streets, by the way. And that's the same for the US. It's North America, right? That's not just kids who end up out on the streets. That's kids who they're connecting through, social media platforms and things like that. It doesn't take much. That's why we have to be really diligent in how we understand what human trafficking looks like and keeping our kids safe, and understanding that monitoring their device use isn't about invading their privacy. It's about keeping them safe.
I don't know. If you ask me, it takes a lot of balls to do that to people. I mean, you have to be a piece of shit to endure it and not let it bother you as to what's going on. I don't know, because you're in Canada, I'm sure you're aware, but how serious our border crisis is now that we're having from Mexico coming over. And, besides the fentanyls, the sex trafficking and all of the above, children, women, men, all the above, we're going to have our hands full. I mean, our hands are full, but it's going to get nothing but worse.
Well, I just want to make it clear, though, that domestic trafficking, meaning the trafficking of the citizens in our own countries, and this is true of Canada and the United States, sex trafficking, the trafficking of children is more prevalent. The numbers are higher than the trafficking coming from other places. And the number one victims for trafficking are those that are in your child protective services care.
Wow. You think the system is bent?
The system is more than it's broken. The system, there are houses out there, there are group homes that are the traffickers.
Right.
They're in the United States alone, they estimate that 1% of children in foster care disappear every year. So on average, you've got about 470,000 kids in foster care every year. 1% of those, that's the average. They don't have hard numbers. They don't track it effectively, just disappear from care. And the number of times that there will be one of these busts where they go in and maybe there's a bunch of kids in a hotel or something like that, where they will find kids who were in foster care not reported missing, which also means that the foster care home is collecting a check for them and nobody is doing anything about it.
Right. Yeah, I did several shows on foster care, and I truly believe that there's good foster care and there's very bad foster care, and it's sad.
Yeah, there's very easy ways, not easy ways, but better ways to monitor. But the fact is that the system is so broken that nobody is willing to invest in them and invest in children. And it's a money-making machine. There's a lot of states that are for profit, right? It's a money-making machine.
Everybody's in it it's all about the money and everything that's going on with us. Unfortunately, even our current situations, from illness and to these shots to everything. But you managed to get away from your grandparents. Took you in to shield you from your mother, correct?
I don't know that they took me in to shield me from my mother. I don't actually know how that rolled out. I think that part of it was my mother wanting not to have the responsibility of myself and my half brother while she went husband hunting. Let's remember that she never got called out or accused of dropping me out of the 2-story window. And I never told the truth because I was already the family liar. I knew nobody would believe me, and I didn't know what she would do to me next.
So there was no child protective services involved or anything like that. It was just an accident, and then she wanted more freedom, so she shoved you and your brother off to your grandparent.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that's how it rolled out. Again, I was too little to know how that actually unfolded. Okay.
Let's talk about your father/stepfathers. Let's go back. Where, and I know this, I read up on your story because I find this fascinating, because as a father, I couldn't even imagine this. But your original father, your birth father,
Mm-hmm.
Where did he go?
So my biological father and my mother, that they came together, that was their second marriage. And they were married for about 14 months. And when he left me behind. He paid child support for me throughout my life. I know that. But he apparently didn't believe that I was his. My mother was cheating on him. I'm not giving him a free pass, and nor would he expect me to. But he pretty much disappeared from my life. In becoming an adult, I was fortunate to connect with him in my late 30s and ended up with a really close relationship with him, actually. And he explained to me that when I went to live with my grandparents, it didn't occur to him that I would be unsafe. So he did leave me with her for a period of time where he apparently didn't care whether I was safe or not. But at that point in time, he did say that it was somewhat of a relief, but he also didn't think I was his child. And then my stepfather is the first one. So my mother had a thing. She would marry them and then introduce me to them.
Oh, wow.
Apparently this is standard. I'm laughing because it's like standard practice in narcissistic parent world.
That's beyond screwed up. That's beyond screwed up.
It's bizarre. You know, it's just really bizarre. I don't know how she managed that. She could be obviously very engaging and very charming, and she was very, very beautiful. So my mother shows up at my grandparents' house with my new daddy, tells me to go on the couch, sit with him. I was like, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, sit with him, hold his hand, and say hi, daddy, to him. And I didn't want to because it was a perfect stranger, but not doing what my mother said was not an option. That was more scary than actually doing what I was told. So I went, I sat next to him, and as it turned out, he was a really loving human being. I became like a daddy's girl, and he was a big part of me feeling safe and connected to a male role model until he died when I was 12. And then 4 months later, I get a phone call. I'm staying at my aunt's house getting ready to go to summer camp 4 months after my stepfather died. And my mother introduces me over the phone to my new father and tells me to call him daddy. And he says, no, she can call me Pop, because he had the common sense to know that my daddy had just died. And she said, nope, that's not how it will be. So that was my next daddy. And then the stepfather after that, I only met a few times in adult life. And he seemed like all of them were a really lovely human being.
Let's back up to your first stepfather. You said you felt safe with him.
Yes.
How did your mother treat you with him being in the picture?
When he was around, she didn't treat me any kind of way, other than to always force me to kiss her goodnight and tell her that I loved her. She didn't treat me any kind of way, really. Just like I was there, but I wasn't there kind of thing. When he was gone, that's when she abused me. She would not do anything in front of witnesses ever. My brother was the only one who ever witnessed any abuse at all, and vice versa. And she did that very rarely. She did not like to have witnesses.
Where's your brother now?
He is his mother's son. He is still in a relationship with her, and he lives in Montreal. He's got what appears to be a stable life. I hope he does. He's been married for decades, but he chose his mother over his sister. His need for her love and acceptance, and he's older than I am, and their dynamic is different, is more important than protecting his little sister, which is not unusual. It's what happens very often in these family dynamics, is that in a narcissistic family system, the person who threatens the silence, who exposes the abuse, is the person who is off the island.
This is fascinating. Sad, but fascinating. So,
Yeah.
I mean, a strong man, your brother, or a man.
Man. I mean, I'm not here to insult my brother, but if he were a strong, healthy man, knowing what he knows, and he does know his own experience, he knows who my mother is, the fact that he would choose to keep her in his life and treat me exactly the same way that the other family members did is really awful. You know, he never healed to the point or got perspective to understand that we were both being abused. And so he drank the Kool-Aid that I was the scapegoat and the bad one, and he's not.
Do you think that the way your mother is was brought on from the raising of her parents, since there were some things that were going on with you over there? Do you think the same thing happened to her that's happened to you, kind of?
I do think that, well, so I was the favorite grandchild of my grandfather, the favorite. And my grandmother used to always refer to my mother as being his favorite. So in my mind, that does say something. And I don't know that she was. I suspect she was. Regardless of whether she was or not, I can say that my grandmother definitely had very narcissistic traits. And when you have somebody who has narcissistic traits raising children, that's going to get passed on to them because they're going to be abusive towards those children, or at least one of them. My mother definitely was her scapegoat in the way that I look back and realize she was treated. Narcissists aren't born, they are made environmentally, right? So, and they're made very early on in life. So knowing that, I would say that definitely something within that household. I mean, my grandmother was also an alcoholic. My mother did not get her emotional needs met, and they broke her to the point that she became a person who has no empathy and feels entitled to do whatever she wants to other human beings, which is what a narcissist is.
Do you feel, and I've said this on other shows before, that my daughter brought it up, and she, in her version of saying things, she's going to be 17 here soon, but she's an old 17, and she feels that narcissism is hereditary is not the word, but you feel it rubs off. You hang around it enough, and it gets instilled in you, and you carry it on.
Okay, so actually being a narcissist, like where you lack empathy, where you lack the ability to feel for another human being, that actual emptiness, the inability to love, operating in the world like you're a 2-year-old child frozen in time, that doesn't rub off. That is next level. But I will say there are people who are walking around narcissistically wounded, carrying traits because of the things that they learned in their homes to survive their childhood. And so, for example, if you're a child who isn't getting your needs met and you learn that if you manipulate, you can get your needs met, you take on that trait. Well, narcissists navigate their entire life using manipulation. The difference is a child who uses that in that environment will bring that into an adulthood. And when they see that that's not a good way to treat people and that it's backfiring on them, they will do something to correct that. Whereas the narcissist will never make that connection.
Okay. Let me go back to your third or your second stepfather that asked you to call him Pop.
Yeah.
How long did that go for, and how did that work out for you?
So I loved him a lot. I thought that he was really nice. He was really great. I didn't actually live with him that long, though, because they got married when I was 12 years old, just the summer of my being 12 years old. I'm a January baby. I lived with them through one school year, I think, and then the following, so that would be 9 months. I spent 2 to 3 months in Canada doing summer camp. This was when I was living in Miami. And then I went to boarding school in Connecticut for a year. So I didn't live with either my mother or my stepfather at that point. The interaction that I did have with him, and I had again with him when I was 17, he had some stuff, but he was overall, I think, a really nice man who had good intentions and would not do anything intentionally to hurt anybody. He knew of one incident where she wrapped her hands around my throat, and that never happened again. He came and he talked to me about it, and I don't really remember what he said because I was pretty traumatized, but it never happened again. And the reason that she headed off at the pass and let him know it happened, or that she did that, was because of the fact that I had marks on my neck. And there was another incident where she assaulted him and kicked him in the face and broke his glasses, and he had kind of a gash here. And at that point, he told me that I was, I think, 13. And he said, I think that your mother has borderline personality disorder. We didn't really talk about narcissism so much back then, I don't think. I didn't know what that meant. It was like he was confiding in a little 13-year-old, and I'm thinking, oh, you don't know the half of what my mother does. and it became a dead conversation. That was the only conversation we ever had about that.
And what happened to him?
He died of cancer, as I understand it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
While she was married to him still, or did he leave her?
Of course, nobody leaves except my father. Well, and her first husband, but I think she left him.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Where did you start? Born when you were going through the early childhood stages, where in the country were you living at that time?
I lived in Montreal. I was born in Montreal. So I lived in Montreal from birth to 9 years full time. I think in like 1972, I spent some time in Miami. I know that's when she first started kind of going there. And then by the age of 9, I was living there full time, except for the summers I was doing in Montreal or in summer camp in Ontario.
How did you get into the United States?
My mother married an American, but I was an illegal alien and I didn't know it. And my mother made me lie to immigration officials, which backfired because they caught me. So my brother and I were flying out of Montreal into the US, and we end up in this big conference room, and I'm just a little thing. I'm not 9 years old yet. No, I must be 9 because I was in grade 3. So I was attending school in Miami. And so they asked me where I go to school. And I'm like, I don't go to school, because I knew that I'm supposed to say I didn't go to school, that I was only visiting. And they pressed me a little bit, and I broke immediately because I didn't want to lie. And because, well, I was easy to break because I was 9 years old. But my mother actually was telling my brother and I, and my brother held the lie, which is one of the reasons I think he's the way he is, because we were taught to lie to anyone, including law enforcement officials. Like, how twisted of a message is that to send a child? But if she thought we were lying to her, wasn't good.
So she set you guys up with passports, everything, and you guys were coming from Canada back and forth?
I guess.
Oh. Okay.
I mean, I was a little kid, so eventually I did get a green card.
Okay. I mean, there's just so much here. And we're already getting ready to go over.
By the way, she married an American and she became an American citizen eventually.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
No, we're going to go overtime because I'm not done yet.
Okay. A
little bit over time. I bet. Okay. So you as a child went through all this. Most children, people, adults, male or female, this stuff changes you forever.
Yeah.
Talking to you, you seem pretty damn together.
Took a long time.
How?
A lot of therapy. Took a long time. And let me just say to you that every time somebody experiences abuse, trauma, we're altered, right? We're altered from the inside out. Trauma lives in our body. It changes how our brain is wired. It changes our cellular makeup. It changes everything. So from the day before that you suffer a trauma to the day after, you are a different person. And this is why it's so important that we recognize that when we're punishing a criminal for assaulting another human being, that human being is now carrying a wound for a lifetime, that they will have to continually be diligent about healing. That being said, this took a long time. I didn't start telling my story or speaking out and not feeling ashamed until about 12 years ago, and I'm 56 years old. Survivors of childhood sexual abuse, by and large, will not speak out until they're in their 50s because it takes that long to realize that it's not our fault and get the help that we need. In my 20s, I was very fortunate to be married to somebody who had a degree in psychology, who I was able to go to when I was having very real thoughts of ending my life and not coping well because of all of the flashbacks and memories that I was having, got me into therapy and got me the help that I needed right away. And I wanted that help and I was ready for that help. So I spent the better part of 2.5, almost 3 years in very intensive therapy. And since that time, I am always aware that I'm healing and that I have to work to continue to grow and heal, because there are things that happen. There are triggers that I experience that I don't even have memories to attach them to. And that is what the legacy is of childhood trauma.
Because again, the reason I'm asking you this question is because it would seem to me, and don't take this the wrong way, because I'm hoping I put this in the right perspective. No, it's hard to put this together.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm an afterthinker and I'll get it right down the road, but too late. I would think, because dealing with, I'm older too. I've dated plenty of women that have had issues, so to speak.
Yeah,
And-
I've dated plenty of men that have had issues too, so to speak.
Okay. I mean, men and women. I don't see here. I already stepped on myself.
Issue. Yeah, but I get what you're saying. Go ahead. Sorry.
My point being is, how do you handle and have a healthy relationship? I mean, I guess it's like, how the hell did you manage to? Because I'm telling you, by looking at you and speaking with you, and I've talked to you prior to the show and things like that, there's not a sign of like I could snap or you know what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that it happens, but it's like not many people, I don't think, can keep it as together as you seem.
I don't think it's about keeping it together. I think it's about healing the wounds that make us react before anything has happened. Recognizing that when we're triggered by somebody else's behavior, assuming that we're with somebody who's healthy, might be more about us, and addressing those things before we come forward. I'm a very thoughtful, methodical person in my life now, and I've been this way for a great many years, but it's because I learned that to get my needs met, this is the way to do that. So I'm not a person who's volatile, who flies off the handle, but if I am having a coping mechanism, a survival response, like for example, there's something called being a fawn, where I'm the good little girl. I have to come back in from that to be able to stand up for myself. Not so much now, but if somebody's pushing my buttons, I may not be able to show up for myself in that moment. So a lot of abuse survivors don't just go into fight and become these like crazy people because somebody is triggering them. A lot of us actually end up saying nothing. And you know what they say about still waters running deep. And then one day a switch flips and we're out and we're gone. Learning how to have functional relationships has been very challenging for me. I mean, I was married for 15 years, but I was really young then, and he was really parental. And that relationship was functional for that point in my life. But it didn't last because it couldn't be functional for all of my life. And a lot of that had to do with the trauma that I brought into that relationship.
I get that. And that's what I guess I'm trying to say. It's like, it seems like he helped you through a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
But you grew, and you came in for whatever reason, and then everything outgrew. But now, male or female, you in the situation of these people with traumas and this and that, you have some unexpected soul that you meet, that you like, that likes you, and they really have nothing to do with that. But having that healthy relationship, and that other person, the new person, not paying the price for the past, that seems like there's a little bit of difficulty for that. No,
not even a little bit.
You're one of the few, because I know lots of people who can't seem to differentiate that. And when they blow up, it goes taken out onto that person for no reason other than they can't, help what's happening.
Well, I think that sometimes when a person ties a past relationship or experience to what's happening in a current relationship, when it's not one and the same, it's because they're unaware of the fact that they're being triggered, right? So here's this person over there not doing anything with the same intent of the original trauma experience. But what happens in our bodies is that we go into a survival mode. So the part of our brain that would show up and think logically and go, okay, this is not that person wishing to do me ill, doesn't click in. It's like it's taking a nap, and a person becomes very reactive because of their past trauma. And what that's a good indicator of is that somebody that needs to be going to therapy to work that stuff out, so that when those things come up that are similar, that are stimulating that little person inside who went through that original trauma happens, they're able to practice the pause and head off their reaction and come back in and learn that that person is not one and the same. All of those things can be corrected, but we have to be aware of why they're happening. And as time goes on and as psychology takes advances and science, we're now learning better how that works and how to resolve it. There are a lot of trauma survivors out there who do not bring this forward because of the fact that they are able to connect to services and do the things that they need to do to improve their life. And while I'm at that, I'm going to plug a book that's not mine. Is that okay?
Sure.
So there is a book, it's called How the Body Keeps the Score. And it talks a lot about how trauma lives in the body and how it rules our reactions and the things that we can do to help. First of all, in understanding why we're reacting the way we are able to forgive ourselves, not punish ourselves, and correct those things without further doing damage to ourselves. But it's just such a great book to learn how trauma works and learn how to heal from it. I work with my clients with that book every single time. It's one of my favorites.
I don't doubt. My thing was, I guess, to sum it all up, it's just walking into a situation, you see a wonderful person, but yet you end up becoming the punching bag for other reasons, and you're blindsided.
Yeah, but could it be that you have two people who have some sort of trauma? Listen, nobody makes it through life without trauma.
Absolutely.
And so one person's crazy is stimulating the other person's crazy, and it's a bad combination. A lot of times it's also that. They talk about find the person who doesn't make your crazy crazier, right? So I think the key is when you're dating and you're looking to get involved in a relationship, and I do talk about this as a trauma survivor, because trauma survivors will do one of two things. It's a very black and white world until it's not, until they move into the gray zone, which is where most of us should live. So they either trust completely and they throw it all out there and inevitably end up being re-victimized because they throw it out to anyone because they want to connect on that level, or because they feel that that's what transparency actually looks like. And then there's the other camp that's so closed off and won't trust at all that they can't possibly build any intimacy with that person. If we can go into relationships at a place of neutral trust where we're not just giving it all up, but we're not holding it all down, and take our time to get to know that person and earn trust on both halves, you're more likely to end up in a functional, healthy relationship because you're taking the time to see who that person is before you get deeply involved and get blindsided by something that doesn't work for you.
Amen. I mean, but I've found that no matter, sometimes you think you put in a lot of time and ghosts come out of the closet, and sometimes it's only occasionally you go, well, I can live with that. And I don't know. Again,
I assume you mean behaviors, not past things.
Sure. All the above. I'm getting a question. Michael wants to know what the name of that book was again that you recommend.
How the Body Keeps the Score. And the first name of the author is Bessel, Bessel, and I don't remember the rest of the name. I use the book all the time, but it's gone. So How the Body Keeps the Score.
Okay. I'm sure they can find it on Amazon.
It'll come right up. Yeah, it's an excellent book.
Wow. Listen, this has been Joe. This has been an amazing conversation, sad but true conversation. But again, we're bringing awareness, and back to, even I saw you mention it in all your videos, you're not alone. And part of my getting through the holidays is that if we touch one person more than before, I mean, this is, I find it beyond fathomable of that kind of, I can't imagine treating somebody like that. I just can't. I'm not that way, but especially a child. Anybody who knows me in this show, but this show was started because of divorce and being a single parent and trying to hang on to custody of my daughter, and because I adore her, and I've given many sacrifices to make sure I'm around all the time. And then there's those that don't have that luxury and still manage to survive, but long for that kind of stuff. And I'm just here to bring it to light. And you were kind enough to give me the time to be on this show and bring more attention in a much different way. This was probably one of the more detailed shows of child abuse and things like that than I've had to date. But I want to tell people, we're going to talk about a couple more things before we go, because we are over time. I want to tell people how they can get a hold of you. You have a website, correct?
I do. And you threw it down there. It's marniespeaks.com. And you can find, well, you can connect with me there. You can email me through there. You can also find resources. In fact, I'm pretty sure I have that book listed on there for people who, want to look into how the body keeps the score. A little something that I do want to leave you with, and I know we're going into contact information, is just for all the survivors out there who are no contact with their families, the ones who are off the island. The holidays are a really, really difficult time. I've been living that way for over 30 years of my life. The thing that works for me is trying to plan something for myself that is special, because I don't have that family to connect to. And I know there's people early on their journey. And then there's been years where I plan to do nothing and I shut it all down and self-isolate, and that's okay too. Just know that I see you, I feel you, and I understand how difficult the holidays are for so many of us who have survived abuse.
Yeah, I think that when the brain is too quiet, that's when you do too much thinking, and sometimes you think yourself into a spiral. Staying busy is good. Friends, if you have them, if you're lucky enough. I mean, I tell the stories a lot. I spent, being in LA away from people, and I've spent many a holiday by myself. But it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's just a day.
Yeah.
But the holidays have an emphasis, though. They amplify all the good things, and it really affects people, and that's a tough one. You mentioned to me when we were in conversation prior about you're trying to get a bill passed in Congress. Can you tell everybody about that?
Yes, and actually, when you go to my website, there is a link on there that will tell you everything that you need to know about the bill, and it's going to make it really simple for you to be able to help. And this is in the United States. So there is a legislation that is on the table for December that will allow for some tightening of some laws and also funding to protect children who end up being homeless, to protect runaways from being trafficked. So if you go to my website, there is an entire page that's dedicated to that. It's also available on my TikTok. I talk about it a little bit more in depth there. But basically what I need you to do is call your representatives, your congresspeople, send them an email. And on the link on my website, there's something that you can copy and paste. There's a script, and there's even a button for you to search out who you need to contact with all their contact details. So we're making it really easy. It costs you nothing but maybe 5 minutes of your time to make a huge impact on protecting children who are the first ones to be trafficked.
Sad but true. And I don't know how they could ever get a grip on it. I don't know if they ever will, but again, anything is better than nothing. If you can save one child, I just can't even imagine that the people are so cold and heartless to do that to children and adults and everybody else. But it's a cold, cruel world out there. And I tell everybody constantly to keep your eyes open. Is your mother still alive?
Yes. I laugh because I have a saying, evil never dies. Not very nice, but whatever.
It's okay. I just thought I caught something about you saying that you didn't go to her funeral, or
no. What you caught is I will not go to her funeral when she dies.
Fair enough. And you get a lot of criticism towards your outlook or your views towards your mother, like you're supposed to forgive her and it's okay, and you don't take any shit from anybody. And I've watched you on TikTok, and I commend you for that. I don't blame you. I don't think, maybe these people just don't really understand the full extent of what they're saying and understanding you.
Some don't. Some are intentional, some are not. Some is ignorance for sure. But there's a lot of them out there. I can tell by the language that they are people who are either abusers or enablers themselves. And so, I represent them not having the power that they feel that they have by sharing my story. And I have a community on TikTok that's now at over 130,000 people. One of my videos just flipped to 1 million today, 1 million views. So these people who are coming at me because they have the concern that somebody's going to do the same with them and that we're breaking the cycles of abuse. What I see in my practice now is that where my clients were mostly in their 50s, I have a lot of clients now in their 30s because of the sharing of this information. They're understanding that they have a right to heal and take care of themselves sooner than we did. So I see a future where we end a lot of this cyclical abuse, right? And those people who are coming at me don't like that.
Well, again, you don't take any shit from anybody, and I think you're one hell of a woman. I mean, I don't see this a lot, although I'm sure there's a lot out there. But you brought yourself forward. We found you. You were able to come on. I believe everything happens for a reason. I truly do. I mean, sometimes it takes me months to get a hold of people. Somehow or another, we connected. You fell into the right place right now as we're doing the getting through the holidays. That hit you kind of in the right spot too. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to, I know you do this for a living, but you didn't have, life is full of choices. You could have been doing something else, but I happen to have this open slot and you came right and filled it. And boy, did you fill it.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. Anybody wanting to get a hold of Marnie right here, Marnie Grundman at www.marniespeaks. She has her website there. You can learn more about her. She's on TikTok, very prominently on TikTok. If you want to see some colorful approaches to the way she handles people who she whips them on around. So like I said, you're a tough cookie, and I commend you because the world is full of hate, and unfortunately it shines more than the love. And I'm a big advocate on love. I just think that we just don't have enough of it.
I think it's full of love too. So
okay, well, that's it. All right, Marnie Grundman. I'm sorry, Grundman. Again, it's right here. I thank you. We'll be in touch, and I hope maybe I can have you on next year, and we keep up what's going on, because I don't think we can ever reach enough people, and it's very important. So I thank you again for being on the show. Say goodbye to everybody. Hey, one more thing. If you want to leave just one word, something to everybody for the holidays or for in general, just leave us. Why don't you go out with that?
Well, actually, I think I'll leave it in general. The world is actually full of love and really beautiful people. And I don't want to let us ruin that by focusing on the people who mean to do us harm. Let's just be our beautiful selves and do the best we can to make a difference in the world. And the haters, well, they can take a long walk off a short pier. How about that?
How about that? And I love you for being on this show and saying what you and speaking the truth. And not everybody can open up and talk. A lot of people just keep it in and you explode. So you're speaking for the speechless. And again, I do love you for doing all this. Thank you. Have a great holiday. We're going to be in touch. And again, all this will live on. So I hope we get some traction out of it. Okay.
Yeah, me too. All right.
All right. Bye. There she is, folks. Marnie Grundman right there. And she is out. I need a drink. Parched. Wow. That was deep. But somebody's got to do it. And here we are. Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show. Marnie Grundman telling her story, and what a story it was. And she lives to tell about it. And she looks pretty healthy. A lot of people can't make it that far. Hope you take this and share. I'm sure there's people out there that that need to hear things like this. Do the right thing. Say, hey, you need to check this out. Referrals. Or go to marniegrundman.com. marniespeaks.com. Right there. I want to thank everybody for paying attention, for watching the Peter G Show, Life of Peter G, every Wednesday like clockwork, God willing, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, and 9 p.m. on the East Coast. If you can't watch the show live, you can always pull it up on demand. It's easy to find. Go to YouTube. And while you're at YouTube, please just do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. It's free. It's easy. It'll notify you when we do these shows. I'm really pushing the YouTube because I don't know what might be happening with some of these other platforms that I'm on, but YouTube right now, I want to make sure that we have our presence there. Also, if you can't watch the show, I thank you for wanting to pay attention, but you're driving and you want to listen, you want to get something out of this, just Google Peter G Show podcast. Put an earbud in your ear, take the show with you. You can listen to it in the car, you can listen to it at work, you can listen to it while you're walking or jogging, doing your exercising, anything, and you'll get something out of it. It's the next best thing to be in there. And lastly, don't forget next week, because next week, part of my Getting Through the Holidays series, and it's probably going to be the last show of it before Christmas, I'm going to have on this show family law attorney Deborah Whitson. She's going to be on the show from New York, and she's going to join us, and we're going to talk about everything, to learning how to co-parent, trying not to blow everything up, narcissism. She talks a lot about that, which we're talking about. It seems to be really a big problem. So you get a lot of good advice and experience from other people who deal with this stuff on a daily basis. So you're not going to want to miss that. Next Wednesday, December 21st, Deborah Whitson from Whitson Family Law, and I promise you that something will come out of that too, because she's very active in this, and I was fortunate enough to get a hold of her, and she's going to spend December 21st, next Wednesday, on this show with us, and I promise you not to disappoint. As always, I thank you guys for watching the show. Be kind. We're getting close to Christmas. The holidays are tough for a lot of people, really tough, and that's why we're doing this. Pay attention to your surroundings, the people around you. You don't know what's going on in their heads. They may look okay, but they may not be okay. Listen. Let them talk. Be their shoulder. The last thing you want to do is find out that somebody did something that they pretty much probably would have regretted, especially during the holidays, and they have families and children, and you wish you could have done something about it. You have to be proactive. So be kind. You don't have to be an ass, but you don't have to take a bunch of crap from people either. Life is short. Be grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for all the people in my life, and I'm grateful to be able to be here and do this with you and for you. So again, till next week, my name is Peter G. You're watching Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show, and as always, I love you guys, and peace out.
Peter G Show, Peter G Show, divorce dad, single dad, divorce dad, single dad, Peter G Show.